Excuse me. Excuse me. I should have blown the nose before services. Okay. We'll get it right here in just a moment. Very glad for the presence of each one. I think I know a lot of you by this time. But by all means, let's shake hands if we haven't done so. I'd like to have some encouraging words. I'm very, well, yeah. I don't know if I can do it. So let's try again. Thank you to the Pruitts for keeping me in their home. And, you can open the windows on Friday after I'm gone, and that will all... yeah, that's fair. And, the Colliers had me to their home, and that was very good. Reminded me that I have children at home, so that makes it a little harder. And that's all right. I really appreciate the kindness, and we had good talks. And we had good jokes too. If you ask me, they were good. And it's great that there is a faithful church here. This is a good congregation. People here are very loving, very kind, very uplifting. I enjoyed our conversations that we've had and meals and different things like that, and that is great. Chip has held a special place for me, and Herman too, and Leroy. You guys, I mean, we've seen some things, done some things. So I appreciate you all holding up Chip's hands too. I know him to be a very faithful gospel preacher, and I know that Linda has a lot to do with that. All right, we try not to admit that aloud, okay, especially when she's listening, but she has a lot to do with it. She has a lot to do with it. I know that. So there's a lot of things that we can talk about in that regard, but I have a lot of material, and I don't want to keep everybody, and the sun's going down and all of those things. So let us begin in our study about how to qualify elders. We spoke last night about what they're for, what elders are for, and looked at especially at Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 16, at the reason for which God gave officers in the first place is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. And we need that. It's a positive thing that they do for us. We gain the maturity, we gain the unity, we gain the knowledge, we gain the protection from error and every wind of doctrine. We gain so many things by the plan of God if we follow the plan of God. And so we want to look today at how to qualify elders. God has the intent that we're going to have leaders among us, and these leaders are going to be human beings. It's going to be some of us. But we should say at the outset here, we'll look at a couple of verses, but they're not cherry-picked verses. These are well in context, but we'll get the idea from just a couple of verses. Actually, Acts chapter 14 is the first one. But God intends for us to have elders. And what we mean by this is when you read the New Testament, you don't find another order. You don't find another organization. There's not another pattern that you read about in the New Testament. And the New Testament talks about it in an almost matter-of-fact way that, this is what you do. And I think that's because it's what God intends for us to do. Just kind of out of the box, that's the way it's supposed to be. That's what He intended. Elders in every church is what you read in Acts 14 and 23. There's this trip where Paul goes out and back, preaching and different places. And here on the way back, they've gone out and they've had some adventures and they've come back now. And on their way back in 14 and verse 23, when they had appointed elders for them in every church, with prayer and fasting they committed them to the Lord, in whom they had believed. So all the places where they established churches on their way out, as they're coming back in, they're appointing elders in these churches. And, they didn't have airplanes and they didn't have cars. And so this wasn't, the following week. And it probably wasn't the following year either. But it wasn't 10 years. And Titus says the same idea, that everywhere they went, as Paul writes this young evangelist in chapter 1 and verse 5, he said, "This is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remained into order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you." So, elders in every town. Now, we will note that in the beginning, when they first preached the gospel of Jesus and Christ is first named in a place, there is one church in town. In every town, that's not a bishop who oversees all the congregations. No. There was just one church. And there's really no reason why that can't be the case. I understand that we now have cities that are quite large, and it makes perfect sense for there to be more than one sound congregation. We're not saying anything otherwise. But and I know, there are a lot of congregations around that doesn't need to be. Let's do the will of God and come together and unite as the people of God in this community. Right? That's the way this used to be. But that's a side point. The main point is that every place where they made churches, if you will, they made elders too. Paul and Barnabas in Acts 14 themselves doing this apparently. In Titus 1, Paul instructs an evangelist to do this. That's the normal New Testament way. Are there other arrangements that people have? Well, I have cited for you the authority for the other arrangements. That is 2 Opinions 3:16. That is the longest verse not in the Bible. 2 Opinions 3:16 is where everything that I disagree with comes from. Okay, I'll just tell you now. That's there aren't other patterns given in Scripture, right? That's the deal. There are not other patterns given. That's what the Bible provides, right? But in all seriousness, when we look around and we take an inventory of what is happening among the brethren and among the churches, most of us don't have elders. Most of us don't have elders. That's the facts on the ground. Facts are friendly, right? The fact is, that's the state of the churches today. And, sometimes people, well, why is that? I know why that is. It's because we disqualify most men from serving. That's why. Yeah, some of the places are very small. Okay. And it might be the case that there really aren't enough men who meet the qualities. There are some things in those qualities that are beyond our personal control, their circumstances. That's true. That might well be the case. But no, what's happening is we disqualify most men from serving. It is what we're doing. It's the way that we're reading the text. It's the way that we're interpreting it. It's the authorities to whom we appeal when it comes time to do this thing. So we have to own that, I think, and we have to figure out what we're going to do. Because the real question is, does the Bible disqualify most men from serving? Is that what I'm reading in the Bible? That most men are not qualified to serve as elders. Is that biblical? That's the real question here. If that's biblical, well then, okay, maybe we are right to disqualify most of them. But if that's not biblical, then we need to make some changes, don't we? That's how I read the Bible. Can we do anything about this? I think we can. And that's the point of this. That, well, we can do this. It can be done. God has given us something that He intends for us to have and He intends for us to benefit from. And we ought to reap that benefit if at all possible. Let me make a side note here as well before we move on to the next idea. But there is this false dilemma that we have. And the congregation I come from, South Austin, Church of Christ, by the way. If you ever go to Austin, please stop in and say hello. We'd be glad to see you. If you have children who are thinking about going to a little school that we have there, you might have heard of it. I like that school. There's a place for them to worship where the brethren are faithful. There's also places for them to worship where brethren are not faithful. But there's one that in South Austin that I will recommend to you. But we don't have elders right now. It's not for lack of trying, I'll say that. So I'm not coming to you. I think this congregation doesn't right now. I'm not even sure. Just to give you an idea that I didn't come, lock, stock, and loaded. I didn't come to attack anybody. It's just the gospel. But I'm seeing this trend. There's a false dilemma. We're thinking to ourselves, well, we're between elders right now. Yeah, okay. This is a false dilemma. The choice before us is not, do we have elders or do we not have elders? That's not the choice. Actually, you don't actually get to choose that. The choice is, do we have qualified elders or do we have unqualified elders? That's the choice. Because somebody is in charge. Somebody is making the decisions. Is whatever it is, maybe it's a body of people, a body of men. I don't know. There's all kinds of things. Somebody's making the decisions. Somebody decides how this is going to be done. Who is going to hold a gospel meeting? Who is not going to hold a gospel meeting? Right? When are we going to meet? Things of this nature. Those choices are being made. They're being made. We have leadership. As much as we joke about it and complain about it, no, we do. We have leadership. How does that leadership compare to the prescription of God in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1? Because this is what is true now. We have a business meeting. We call that a leadership meeting to remind us we are the leaders. We're responsible. But our meeting, if yours is anything like ours, our meeting has single men in it, men with no children in it, men whose children are still toddlers, who haven't done some of the things that happen later. You're not in control of a lot of things. Sometimes there's been men in that business meeting that really they should have been withdrawn from. What are they doing here? And they're making the decisions for the congregation. That's the way it really is. That's our real dilemma. It's not, do you have elders or do you not have elders? No, it's, do you have qualified leaders or do you have unqualified leaders? It's the real choice. And maybe it's the best thing that we can do, how best to do that. That I understand. And that's maybe where some of these things are coming from. But even at our best, and good, faithful, sincere brothers, I'm not accusing the brothers there at South Austin. I'm just saying to you, even at our best is not better than God's arrangement. We're not as good as what God has intended. Talking with an elder, I was talking to an elder today, whom I will not name to protect the innocent. But I was talking to an elder today, and he was saying, I just hope that we're getting this right. We are very concerned about this sister. We're very concerned about this new convert who's very close to her. I want to, deal with this problem forthrightly and timely, but I also want to be sensitive to the impact that that's going to have, and we got to be sure that these don't be discouraged, right? He's weighing these things. I'm sitting there thinking, this is like having a teenager. I hope this is right. I'm trying. I don't want to be over strict here. I don't want to limit these liberties, unnecessarily provoke my son to anger. I really don't. I know that's hard to believe, the young people here. That's hard to believe, but it's true. I really don't want that. And yet, I'm not going to let them just get away with anything, right? So it's just like that. I'm thinking to myself, this brother is trying to do it. And he said, sometimes I feel like it's just my best guess, and that can't be good enough. I said, brother, you're an elder. He said, yeah, you have raised children. They've obeyed the gospel. They're still faithful today. Yeah. And you have other elders. You've got a faithful evangelist. You have people around you. Your best guess is the best guess that any human being is going to make. Right? Nobody is in a better position to do the very best that we can in all earnestness, right, than a duly appointed elder in the Lord's church. They have all the equipment that they need. They've got the faithful wife. They have brought children up through difficult decisions and difficult times. They have, they have a support system around them. You've got, 1 Peter 5, which you wouldn't think of as an encouraging thing, but it's true. 1 Peter 5, where he says, the elders that are sinning, rebuke in the presence of all, that the rest may fear. You say, well, that doesn't sound positive. It is positive, because it means if I make a mistake, I will be told that I made a mistake. And I'll have a chance to repent. Right? You have some protection in that organization that God has made, is what we're getting at. Their best guess, if you will, right? He's saying, I'm making the best guess. Well, I'm pretty sure you're balancing these things. You're thinking about these things. That's of a much higher quality than a single man in his 20s. No offense. I've been a single man in my 20s before. But no offense, but I'm sure that's going to be better. Right? So no, it's not about whether you have leaders or you don't. You have leaders. What are the qualities, though? Right? We have to say that before we move on. But again, I wanted to say about that, the elder too, to give that perspective that we are really trying to be positive in the prescription of the Bible, because it is hopeful. It has the answers. It means we can do it with God's help, of course. But I would say the churches need a course correction on this, because we don't have them. Generally, we disqualify them. And that's something we really need to think about. You have, Deuteronomy 5, very famously, do not turn aside to the right hand or to the left, verse 32. We cannot loosen requirements. No, you don't achieve success by lowering standards. I get that. You cannot loosen requirements, but we cannot introduce requirements either. It isn't turn not to the right hand, but go way off on the left. No, it's not. It's turn neither to the right nor to the left. The scriptures are balanced. We sometimes are kind of extreme, but the scriptures are balanced. And we have to strive for that balance. We can't loosen the requirements of God, but we can't introduce new ones either. You know, in Malachi chapter 1, the priests are being upbraided by the Lord through the prophet Malachi because they were saying the Lord's table may be despised. How? Because they were offering things in sacrifice to God that were stolen. Things that were sick or lame in sacrifice to God. What does it mean? It means anything goes on God's table. We can't err on the side of permissiveness. Anything goes. That's just fine. But on the other hand, you have scribes and Pharisees in Luke 11 that Jesus upbraids, saying in Luke 11:52, you didn't enter the kingdom yourselves and you hindered those who were. And we don't need to make more requirements. We don't need to make it harder to become a Christian. We don't need to make it harder to do the will of God than it already is. Yeah, it's hard enough. Jesus said, count the cost. So no, neither to the right nor to the left. We've got to be committed to the balance of the scriptures, the truth, the pure gospel of Jesus. All right. 1 Timothy chapter 3, let's take a look at these things. Here's the other thing that needs to be said, but that's, that's a lengthy preamble, but it is preamble. We have to think about why, why are we talking about this? What is this for? What are we going to accomplish? We got to talk about that. You just can't, you got to look out and see what's happening. How can it be that a majority don't have elders? How can this be right? I mean, yeah, sometimes it's going to happen. There's going to be those cases. Yeah, but the majority of the time, no, that means we got something wrong here. We need a course correction on that. So the Bible qualifies faithful husbands and fathers. Let's say this first. When it comes to the qualifications of elders, the basic premise is rather simple. He is a faithful Christian husband and father. That's the basic premise. Okay, main idea, writ large, the big thing that we're talking about here in 1 Timothy 3 and in Titus 1. All these details that are in here and the references and things that are within these requirements, they're all pointing back to this. He is a faithful, that is, he's a faithful Christian. And he is a husband, and he's good at that. And he's a father, and he's good at that. That's the main idea. And that's to say, the main way that we disqualify men, most of the time, is by requiring them to be supermen. Typically, that's the way that it goes. The main idea of Scripture is that he is a faithful Christian, a husband, a father. But too often, the way we read these things, he's more than a faithful Christian, a faithful husband, and a faithful father. He's got to be perfect. He's the Superman. And that's going to narrow the pool of candidates precipitously, isn't it? That would account for a lot of things, why people can't do it. So I would say that's the thing we've got to be on our guard against. However, we will also, of course, go with the Scriptures. 1 Timothy 3 is the place where you read the qualities that are required. In verses 1 through 7, the saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, no lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone doesn't know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. So these are 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7. These are the qualities that we are looking for. And right off the bat, we will admit there are some requirements for elders that are not general requirements for salvation. They're unique to this particular qualification for this particular office, if you will. And I think this is a fairly complete list of those things. He has to be a husband. Okay, that is a requirement for an elder. An elder has to be a husband, not a wife. Has to be a husband. Do you have to be a husband to be saved? No. Do you have to get married to go to heaven? No, you don't. You don't have to get married to go to heaven. It's not a general requirement for salvation. But it is a specific requirement for this office. An elder has to be a husband. You don't have to be a husband. That is, you don't have to marry, right? You don't have to become a husband. But I will also say, if you do become a husband, this is the kind of husband you have to be. Right? You don't have to marry. But if you marry, this is what it has to be like. He has to be a father. Do you have to have children to go to heaven? No, you don't. You have to have children to be saved? No, you don't. It's not required. Married couples are not required to have children. That's not in the Bible. There's no requirement for this in the New Testament age. But if you do, you do have to have children to be an elder, though. He has to be a father. Even though I don't have to have children as a Christian, if I do have children, this is the kind of father I have to be. So what I read about that the elders are supposed to do, I'm supposed to do those things too. That's what we're getting at. Not that you have to marry. You don't have to marry to be right with God. But if you do marry, you have to be like this. Husband of one wife. Yeah. If you get married, you cannot be a polygamist and say, well, I don't aspire to the office of elder. Okay, well, that's good to hear, given the circumstances, but we have a problem, right? That's what we're getting at. There's none of these things that you're allowed to do just because you're not trying to be an elder. No, it's not like that. Believing children. Well, we're all required to teach our children what is right. If you are a father, you have to be this kind of father. That's absolutely true. However, whether your children obey the gospel is up to your children. It's not up to you, actually. You teach them, you guide them, you want them to do right. I hope that they do right. I think in most cases they do. Proverbially, you train up the child in the way they should go, and they don't depart from it. That's a proverb, by the way, not a diagnostic. But that's not always true. Sometimes they walk in their own ways. And it's despite everything that you have said and everything that you have done. And you didn't do anything wrong, Dad. You didn't do anything wrong, Mom. They made their own choices. But you can't be an elder, right? It might be the case that your children don't obey the gospel and you're still going to heaven because you discharged your duty as a faithful father, a faithful mother. You taught them what was right. You did what was right before them. You go to heaven because of the righteousness that is in your life and that you did. They're responsible for their own souls. We all have that pesky thing, free will. Starts showing up when you're a toddler and you get the magic word no, right? I used to tell my dad, yeah, he's starting to express his preferences now. Yeah. Believing children is a requirement that's unique to the elder in the sense that he does have to have children who are Christians. Now, that's just the fact of the matter. You're not going to appoint a man who doesn't have Christian children. You can't do it because it's a requirement in the Scripture. But not having believing children, well, that may not be your fault. But by no means are you allowed to just let the children slide. By no means are you allowed to give them no discipline, to give them no correction, to give them no instruction in the Scripture. No, you can't do that. Well, I'm not trying to be an elder, so, I don't really need to. No, that's got nothing to do with it. He can't be a new convert. Remember reading that one? He cannot be a recent convert. Is there something wrong with being a recent convert? Well, no, you can't help it. It's by reason of time. You just obeyed the gospel yesterday, you're a new convert, and you can't do anything about that. You're new. Okay? So, if you were to die in that condition, if you were baptized, like this happened to me. When I was baptized, it was December in Fort Worth. It was freezing outside, and the heater was out at Woodmont. And Tom said he was too old, that his muscles would spasm in the water that cold. So we called over to the building at Westside and went over there. That's where I was baptized. And, I tell you, that car ride over there, I was like, you better be real careful, Mr. Tom. You better be real careful. But we got it. We made it. What if we had gotten into the car wreck on the way home? Could he go to heaven, that new convert? Yeah, he can go to heaven. It's not, being a new convert isn't wrong. This is a circumstance, right? However, everybody's required to mature. Everybody's required to grow. You can't stay a new convert. You got to keep going. Right? Hebrews 5, anybody? By reason of time you ought to be teachers, but you have need for someone to teach you again the elementary principles. Right? No, you're not allowed to stay a new convert. You start, but you keep going. It's the rule by which we've attained. Able to teach. This is coming from Titus. We haven't read Titus, but this is my cue, isn't it? Titus chapter 1. And it is, again, verse 5, I left you there to put things in order, appoint elders in every town as I directed you. If anyone is above reproach, Titus 1 and verse 6. If anyone's above reproach, the husband of one wife, his children are believers, not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination. For an overseer, as God's steward, must be above reproach. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain, but hospitable, a lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firm to the trustworthy word as taught, so that he may be able to give instruction in sound teaching and also to rebuke those who contradict it. For there are many who are insubordinate, empty talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision party. Their mouths must be stopped up, since they're upsetting whole families by teaching for shameful gain what they ought not teach. These are the qualities of elders in Titus. He has to be able to teach. Okay. Maybe not everybody can explain things in a way that's understandable to other people. Maybe not everybody, has that about them. But, and you know, the elder certainly, he has got to be able to do some teaching. That doesn't mean that he has to be able to get in the pulpit and give a full lesson. It doesn't even mean he has to teach the Bible class. People teach, you know, one-on-one. People sit in a classroom across the table from each other and have these intense conversations. They're teaching. Okay, there's lots of things that we can do that are teaching. But maybe he just doesn't have a way with words, or maybe there's something wrong, a speech impediment or something like that, where he can't get himself across. He can't, you know, can't get these ideas to somebody else in a way that they can ingest that and take it and benefit from it. Okay, that doesn't mean he's going to be lost. He's not sinning. But it does mean he's not going to be an elder. Okay, it's circumstances. Circumstances. But everybody does have to be able to give a reason for the hope that is within you. Right? I say, well, I can't teach the lost. Well, what can't you teach them? Are you a Christian? Yes, I am. You were baptized in the name of Christ? Yes. Why? Well, what do you mean why? Well, you can't tell me. I hope you can. If you can tell me, why can't you tell them? You can do that, right? You don't have to be a classroom teacher. You don't have to be a pulpit preacher. You don't, no, but everybody has to be able to explain the truth, right? He also, as we read in Titus 1, has to be able to rebuke those who contradict. Yeah, not everybody has a stomach for that. You know? Not everybody is good with standing up to the schoolyard bully, right? An elder has to be okay with that, okay? And not everybody is, and it's not necessarily a fault. Not everybody's constitution is the same. You know, not everybody's health is the same, physical or mental. Various reasons that are not in and of themselves a matter of sin. The circumstance. But yes, you do need to be able to do that. You don't necessarily have to do it by yourself. Elders are always in a plurality in the New Testament. And hopefully there's an evangelist there. And you know, there are other Christians there too. We don't mean to say elders are the only strong or knowledgeable Christians. We're not saying that. But these are circumstances, right? He has to be able to do these things. Those are circumstances that some of them are out of his control. But you're going to have to do those. We're not going to change the Word of God and loosen requirements that God has. We're not going to do that. But most of the requirements, and this is the overriding point, most of the requirements apply to everybody. Most of them apply to everybody. And I think the easiest way to do that is you take the list and you ask, does every Christian have to do this? Pretty simple. Can any Christian be otherwise? And the answer comes pretty fast, doesn't it? Overseer, 1 Timothy 3, verse 2, overseer must be above reproach. Okay, so the elders must be above reproach. The rest of us reproach away. Right? That's just fine. No, it's not. Right? Husband of one wife. Well, we already did that one, didn't we? Well, yeah, the elders, they can only have one wife. The rest of us, you know, we're moving to Utah. Yeah, no, monogamy is required in the Scriptures of every Christian. No, you don't have to marry, but if you do marry, it's going to be to somebody of the opposite sex, and it's going to be an adult, and it's going to be monogamous. And for life, until death parts you. Right? That's every Christian, not just elders. He has to be sober. The rest of us meet you down at the bar, right? No. No? No Christian is allowed to drink. The Proverbs took care of that centuries ago. Do not look on the wine when it sparkles in the cup. That's before it gets to you. No, you don't drink. Self-controlled. He must be self-controlled. How about us? Do we have to be self-controlled? Respectable. We might make some exceptions on that. No. No, we're not allowed to act in ways that are less than respectable, right? Hospitable. He has to be kind to strangers and foreigners in the country, but not you. You get to kick him. No. Not so. No drunkard. We'd covered that. Not violent. Okay for the rest of us? No. Not quarrelsome. Can Christians be quarrelsome? No. In Titus 1, he said the elder must be upright. The rest of us can be crooked? No. That doesn't fit either, does it? You're not allowed to do that, are you? No. Holy. He's got to be holy. The rest of us unholy, right? That doesn't work either. None of these are fitting, are they? We definitely have the square peg in the round hole, don't we? Disciplined. No, that's us too, isn't it? All of us have to be disciplined. All of us have to be holy. All of us have to be, yes, okay. Must hold firm to the trustworthy word as taught. The Word of God, the Bible as taught. Do you all have to hold to it? Yep, you do. Yep, you do. Elders or not. You all have to do it, don't we? This is the thing. And that's why we started this point the way that we did. The Bible qualifies faithful husbands and fathers. The main point here, there are some circumstances. I understand that. We've gone over that. But the main point is, he's a faithful Christian who is faithfully executing his office and his duties as a husband and a father. That's what qualifies him. As a rule, yes, there are some circumstances that are above and beyond just plain faithfulness. We've been over that, and we're not going to loose those things. But I'm not going to let you bind other things. That's how that works. We can't bind other things. Let's go over some common questions here in closing. Common questions about the requirements. And I'm doing this in good faith. I'm doing this in the belief that these questions you're raising are not a smokescreen for a hidden agenda. That you don't want elders. You don't want authority in the local church. You don't want to give up your place of honor in the business meeting. As one brother said, he literally said that. I don't want to give up my place of honor in the business meeting. That's why he opposed having elders. That is real. That happened in Austin, Texas. No, I'm going to assume that that's not you. That's not the people who are here or the people who are listening to this, the three people who might hear this some other time. I assume that you're asking questions because you really have questions. That's good. One question that we do get is, what is reproach? I agree. Who says reproach? I don't remember the last email I sent that had reproach in it. Luckily, many questions like this can be answered from the rest of the letter. And this is one of them. Excuse me. 1 Timothy 5. Excuse me. Sorry about that. It went down the Sunday pipe. There we go. Reproach is a vocabulary term that was used again in 1 Timothy 5, verses 7 through 8. Particularly we've called out here, but this is about the widows and the care of widows. The church is commanded to care for widows who are truly widows. And you can read the details of that there in 1 Timothy 5. You can read the details of that. But in that place, in the 7th and 8th verses, Paul said, look, these are the regulations. Command these things so that they may be without reproach. But what does that imply? That implies I'm about to tell you what reproach is. We're commanding these things to avoid reproach, because if they don't do that, reproach happens. This is what it is. If anyone doesn't provide for his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Oh yeah, I agree with that. That is a reproach. If a man won't provide for his own family, he won't provide for a widow mother or somebody in his care, his mother-in-law. Yeah, no. Not only can he not be an elder, we're withdrawing from him. That's worse than an unbeliever. Right? That's a reproach. He can't do that. I think probably most people agree with that. What is husband of one wife? Well, it's a bad translation, is what it is. It's a really wordy translation for a fairly simple thing. The phrase is literally one woman man. And you know, we have that phrase in English. Talk about a one woman man. What does it mean? It means he's faithful to his wife. Not going to take him off course. He's faithful to his wife. That's a one woman man there. You're wasting your time, sister. Right? It's a one-woman man. It's just monogamy is what it means. Why would you say this? Well, because, especially in, Greek city-states like Ephesus and Crete. Oh, Crete, wow. Monogamy was not a safe assumption. Polygamy was the norm. And all kinds of gammy. Especially in Crete. No, he's a one-woman man. It's one man for one woman for life, right? It's just saying he's a husband. He's monogamous. He's faithful to her for all of his life. And then people will say, well, what if what if this is his second wife? Well, did he divorce his first wife for fornication? Well, yes, he did. Well, God allows him to do that. Well, but this is now a second woman. No, this is his wife. Right? Yeah. And how many does he have? He has one. And he's faithful to her. He's monogamous. He's a one-woman man. Yeah. Well, I don't agree with that. Okay, so you're going to have to withdraw from him because we're only allowed to have monogamous relationships. Right? I mean, that's just the Bible on this thing. If God allows him to be married, he's lawfully wedded to this woman. Who are we to say that's not valid? Does one child qualify? That's a question that comes up a lot. That's fine. It does say children. It literally says children. That's fair. However, it's a figure of speech like any other. If I asked right now, raise your hand if you had children, and you all did, and I found one of you who has just an only child, I say, now put your hand down. You don't have children. I say, well, yes, I do. No, you don't have children. You have one child. Right? No, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that. That's right. And that's basically what's happening in Genesis 21:7. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? How many children did they have? They had one. Yeah. Right, that's the thing. But you know how that goes when it comes to these figures, right? It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than it is for people to understand a figure of speech. So 1 Timothy 5 and verse 4, if the widow has children or grandchildren, is part of the instructions for when she is to be cared for. And some of the qualifications in the next paragraph include in the 10th verse, if she has brought up children. This is very useful to the question, does one child qualify, okay? She is to be qualified to be taken onto the role for care. These are the qualities she has to exhibit. She has to meet these requirements. And one of these is she's brought up children. And the other is if she has children or grandchildren, let them give a return to their parents. Like they're on the hook first. The church doesn't take care of her by default. Her children take care of her by default. But what if she only has one child? Is he required to take care of her? Now we have a problem, don't we? No, we don't, actually. You might have a problem with some brethren who think it has to be more than one child, but they're wrong. 1 Timothy 5, very clearly, if she has children and they're required to take care of her, her only child is also required to take care of her. Of course it is. And you can't have it both ways. It's the same author, it's the same letter. You can't have it both ways. You're going to have to interpret it that way. If you're going to say the elder with one child does not qualify because the verse says 10, because she has to bring up children, not just a child, for care from the church, and also that one child is not required to take care of her either because it says children, not child. So she's just toast, man. Yeah, no, that's not right. I am a little flippant about it because I'd like to illustrate the absurdity of that. You can see how that's not compatible. Let the Bible interpret this for us. That's not compatible. It doesn't make sense, and I can't change it. I can't make it some other way. We're going to have to read it that way. I think those things are there for a reason. What if some of the children don't believe? Titus 1:6 says, having faithful children. This is very similar. He does have to have children who believe. If a man has two daughters and these daughters are both Christians, does he have children who believe? Yes, he does. But I didn't tell you, he also has a son. And his son is not a Christian. Oh, well, then he doesn't have children who believe. No? No, that's not right, is it? He still has children who believe. Yeah, he does. There is not a place that says all of his children must be Christians. It doesn't say that. It says he has children who are Christians. It doesn't say all of his children are Christians. It doesn't say he has no unfaithful children. 100% compliance. That's not there. He does have children who are Christians. Yeah, there's going to be judgment. Right? I have 10 kids and one of them is a Christian. Okay, let's think about that. Right? There might be some judgment here. I get it. I understand that. And I can't imagine 120, 150 years ago when people had 12, 15 children. Did anybody qualify? Was there anybody who had 12 children and every single one of them was a Christian? Well, there probably was somebody. But you know what I'm saying. Like, that seems like a modern invention to me. What it says is he has faithful children. Does he have children who believe? Yes or no? Well, he does. Okay, then we can consider this, right? That doesn't mean put him in there. It means, okay, we'll check that. We'll move to the next thing. Who's not a recent convert? I'd like to make this point to you. The irony of reading 1 Timothy 3 for the qualifications of elders is that it is the case in point. It is, Exhibit A in the New Testament for the birth of an eldership. The entire life cycle of the eldership is captured here. In Acts 19 is where Paul shows up at Ephesus and finds these disciples of John. And he teaches them about Jesus, which is what John was doing, and they were prepared as they were supposed to be because John was faithful. And they were faithful, and they had what they had up until that point, not having heard the gospel before. And when the gospel came, they were rightly prepared to obey it. And they did. They were baptized in the name of Christ. They become Christians right there, Acts 19 and verse 5. Paul's there in Ephesus for a time, teaching, working with them. There's that whole thing about Diana of the Ephesians, actually Artemis of the Ephesians, and the uproar ceases. Acts 20, verse 1. Paul calls the disciples to himself, encourages them, and he departs for Macedonia. Right? Acts 20 and verse 1, departs for Macedonia. Well, you know, over there in 1 Timothy, in chapter 1, remain at Ephesus, so you may charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine. So the letter to Timothy is sent when Paul departs for Macedonia. Yeah. He leaves Timothy there. He tells him this and the qualifications for elders and other things. And then back here in Acts 20 and verse 17, now from the elders of the church in Acts 20 and verse 17, where did they come from? They came from the guys that obeyed the gospel in Acts 19:5. All right, so how much time has elapsed between Acts 19:5 and Acts 20 and verse 17? Did you see what he said to these elders in 31? Be alert, remembering that for a space of 3 years I didn't cease night or day to admonish everyone with tears. How long was Paul among them in Ephesus? 3 years. And then 3 years after they have been baptized, he sends Timothy the requirements for appointing them as elders. And some period of time, we're not sure how many months, but some period of time between Acts 20 verse 1 and Acts 20 verse 17 is elapsed there. But they're being appointed according to 1 Timothy 3. And he can summon them in the 17th verse. Now they have elders. Now, I'm not saying you're going to appoint everybody who's been a Christian for at least 3 years. I'm saying, brethren, any idea that it has to be decades is just wrong. It doesn't. What we need is somebody who is mature, somebody who has been tested, who's gone through things, who has paid a price for the truth. That has a lot to do with the children. Raising these children, having the children be Christians, that has a lot to do with it. Admittedly, it's kind of hard to imagine how did they get there in 3 years, but they did. Because they were appointed. Which is to say, it was done according to the word of the Lord in 1 Timothy 3. Okay, but again, we're not saying you're going to appoint every 3-year person. We're saying that concept that this is somebody who's been a Christian for 30 years. No, it doesn't have to be like that. It could be like this. In fact, it's demonstrably like this. We're reading it in the pages of God's Word. No, they have to be mature. They have to be either. And that's kind of what I think in large part is happening. If it's going to have to be the case that he's got multiple children and every single one of them is a Christian, and he's been a Christian for 30 years now, and they're all of them still Christians, and other things like that, yeah, it's going to be pretty hard to find. That's going to be hard to find. And you're not going to have a lot of elderships. But those are not the Bible's requirements. Those are human requirements. Over in Matthew chapter 9, I appreciate your kind attention. I realize it's a difficult topic. But it is a topic that we need. Matthew chapter 9 and verse 36, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. That's what we're seeing in the churches. But today, perhaps you are not a Christian. Then in the world, you are harassed and helpless. You need Jesus to be your shepherd and the overseer of your soul. Please do think about these things. Should the churches continue to be harassed and helpless? Should the devil continue to rejoice that we have no defensive walls? I don't think so. But if today you are not a Christian, there's no reason you should be lost. We have water prepared that you might be baptized in the name of Christ for forgiveness of sins and get started on this road that we just read, the kind of self-control, the kind of goodness, the outcomes that you have in a lifelong marriage and children who are doing right before God, the influence that you are. These are all attainable goals for you if you'll obey the gospel of Jesus Christ. If today you are not a Christian, you need forgiveness of sins. The blood of Christ is yours in baptism in His name. If today you are a Christian and have not lived right, repent. Make things right with God in your heart. Let us pray with you and for you that you might be restored to Him. Not a one of us is above temptation. Not the elders either.